Kill them all.
One sentence, and the whole palace exploded in screams. Doors were kicked open. Torches swept across the corridors. Soldiers burst into room after room. Children broke into terrified cries. Swords came crashing down. Blood spilled across the stone floors of the house of David. Athaliah stood in the darkness without trembling, without weeping. Her son had just died, and she chose to mourn him with a massacre. By morning, she would leave no heir alive. Not one drop of royal blood would survive the night. But at the far end of the corridor, a woman was running. Jehosheba, one hand clutching her robe, one arm holding a newborn tightly against her chest. Behind her, the nurse stumbled over blood-slick stone. Behind them were blades. Ahead of them was the temple. And before dawn, the holy doors would close. Stay with this story to the very end, because in the night when Athaliah believed she had erased every last trace of hope, God was still quietly preserving the one thing no sword could touch, and what was hidden in that night would grow up to take the throne back from a tyrant. If you love Bible stories told with honesty, emotion, and cinematic depth, subscribe to Fidelia Bible Stories. But for now, let us go back to that night in the palace of Jerusalem. That night, Jerusalem did not sleep. Oil lamps trembled against the stone walls. The shadows of guards stretched long and twisted like hunting beasts. Leather sandals scraped across the floor. Armor struck against armor. Children cried out. Nurses begged for mercy. Small feet ran across cold stone. Swords slid from their sheaths like darkness being released. On that night, the palace of David no longer felt like a palace. It felt like a trap built of stone gold and curse. Athaliah moved slowly through the corridors. She did not need to hold a sword herself. She only needed to give the order, and her order was turning room after room into a grave.
Please, no. He is only a child. He knows nothing.
Athaliah stopped. She looked at the boy. In that brief moment, an ordinary person might have seen a life. Athaliah saw a future throne. She saw a tiny hand today, but one that could one day be lifted by priests before the people. She saw a crying mouth today, but one that might one day be taught to say, "I am the son of the king." She did not see a child. She saw a living threat. And in Athaliah's world, a threat had to be destroyed before it even learned how to name itself.
Do it.
The mother screamed. Athaliah turned away before the scream ended, not because she was softened, because she hated the sound of motherhood when it did not serve power. Somewhere deep inside her, perhaps one small part of her still knew this was monstrous, but that part had been buried too long. Athaliah had learned how to smother that voice beneath the reasoning of a tyrant. If I do not do this, they will do it to me. If I spare them, they will grow up and take revenge. If even one survives, I will never sleep in peace. She did not call it slaughter. She called it stabilizing the kingdom and eliminating rebellion before it could grow. Evil always needs a reason to make itself look more beautiful than it is. Athaliah understood that very well. But on that same night, another woman was running through the palace, not to kill, but to save. Her name was Jehosheba. She was the daughter of King Jehoram of the royal house of Judah. She heard the noise drawing closer and understood at once what was happening. Athaliah was not only taking power, she was erasing David's bloodline. Jehosheba ran through the darkness. No armor, no army, no perfect plan. Only one blazing decision in her heart. At least one child must be saved. She slipped into the royal quarters where the king's sons were kept. Torch smoke stung her eyes. A nurse was holding a baby, her face drained white lips moving in a desperate whisper to God. That baby was Joash, a newborn child, a tiny breath in a night full of swords. Jehosheba had no time to explain. She pulled the nurse close, lifted Joash into her arms, and backed into the shadows just as the sound of soldiers echoed down the hall. Torchlight flashed across the crack beneath the door. The baby stirred. The nurse instantly covered Joash's mouth, trying to keep him silent. Her eyes widened. Tears ran down her face, but she did not dare breathe too hard. The guards entered the room next door. A sword struck. A scream rose and stopped. Jehosheba tightened her hold on Joash. And in that moment she understood that what she was holding was not merely a child. She was holding the last living fragment of a promise. Then, from the far end of the hallway, came another scream. One of the soldiers turned and ran toward it. Jehosheba did not wait a second longer. She ran through a narrow passage past the pillars and out of the palace of David, where on that night the blood of David was being hunted down. She did not run out beyond the city. She did not run to relatives or to any crowded place. She ran to the place Athaliah despised most, the temple of the Lord. Because Athaliah could walk into the king's palace, she could sit on David's throne. She could send soldiers to search every royal chamber. But the temple of God, the place she despised, the place that stood in opposition to the Baal she worshipped, was the one place she did not want to enter. Jehosheba crossed the threshold of the temple with Joash in her arms. Behind her, Jerusalem was still groaning. Then the doors closed, and in the holy darkness of that place, a secret was sealed. Scripture says, Jehosheba took Joash the son of Ahaziah and stole him away from among the king's sons who were being put to death, and they hid him from Athaliah so that he was not put to death. 2 Kings 11:2. Joash was alive. Athaliah did not know, and that was her first defeat. The next morning, Jerusalem woke up in a different kingdom. The day before, the throne had belonged to the house of David. One night later, the throne belonged to Athaliah. She sat on it not by holy anointing, not by covenant, not by the joyful cry of the people of God. She sat on that throne through the blood of her own family. And from that day on, 6 years of darkness began. She erased those who might remind the people of David's house. She drew Judah closer to Baal, closer to the dark inheritance of Jezebel. She wanted to reshape not only the court, but the memory of the people, because memory is the enemy of every usurper. If the people still remembered David, they would ask why the sons of David had vanished. If they still remembered the covenant, they would ask why a woman from the house of Ahab sat on the throne. If they still feared the Lord, they would never bow to Baal forever. So Athaliah did not only need to kill people, she needed to kill memory. She gave greater power to the worshippers of Baal. Matan the priest was elevated. Foreign altars rose like thorns in the soil of Judah. Sacred objects from the temple of the Lord were plundered and used in false worship. Every time the word reached the temple that another holy vessel had been taken, Jehoiada clenched his hands. Athaliah felt satisfaction, not because of gold or silver, because of what it meant. Every sacred object dragged out of the temple was another piece of the Lord's honor in the eyes of the people being pulled down. She not only wanted to rule, she wanted the God of David to remain silent. By day in the palace, Athaliah wore royal robes and carried herself with power, forcing everyone around her to bow. But at night she did not sleep deeply. People did not see that. No one was allowed to see the insecurity of a queen. Athaliah had killed the princes, but she could not kill the unease inside herself. She had taken the throne, but she could not make it feel warm beneath her. She had forced others into silence, but she could not silence the memories inside her own mind. That is the first punishment of tyranny. Tyrants can make others tremble, but they must also live in a room full of ghosts. While Athaliah ruled with the din of power, another world quietly survived within the temple. It was a world of silence, of closed doors, of footsteps that always knew how to stop and listen. Right under the queen's nose, Joash was still alive. He grew up in secret. He could not laugh too loudly. He could not run out into the open courts. He could not speak his own name in front of strangers. He did not fully understand why Jehosheba held him too tightly, or why Jehoiada always stiffened at unfamiliar sounds. Still, he understood enough to know that out there was one name everybody lowered their voice to say, Athaliah. For 6 years, the temple became a small ark, preserving the promise of God from the flood of evil. But that refuge was also like an invisible prison. One cough in the night, one unfamiliar step in the hallway, one curious glance in the wrong place could destroy everything. Jehoiada and Jehosheba were not merely hiding a child, they were hiding a king. And out in the palace, the longer Athaliah ruled, the more she lived in suspicion. She understood too well that power taken by blood must be kept by fear. And that is the most terrifying thing of all. When darkness stays too long, people begin to call it normal. But Jehoiada did not forget. He kept teaching Joash about the Lord, about the house of David, about the covenant, about the promise that had not died. And he knew that one day this secret could not be preserved by silence forever. Then the 7th year came, and he understood something clearly. It was time for the promise to step out of hiding. The 7th year came quietly. There was no outward sign, but Jehoiada knew the time had ripened. Athaliah was still strong. The people's fear was still real, but beneath that fear, weariness had begun to grow. The soldiers still served the court, but many of them no longer belonged to her in their hearts. And Joash was now 7 years old, still too young to fight, but old enough to stand before the people. Jehoiada began summoning men to the temple at hours when no one would notice. 5 captains were quietly called. Levites were invited. Clan leaders were brought into the plan. They did not come all at once. They did not travel in groups. They did not wear the look of men preparing for rebellion. They entered the temple like any other day, but inside each of them, a door was beginning to open. In a closed room, Jehoiada stood before them. The men watched him cautiously. One captain asked,
"Why has the priest called us here?"
Jehoiada did not answer right away. He studied their faces, weighing each one. Then he gave a sign. A back door opened. Jehosheba stepped in. Beside her stood a little boy, small, quiet, bright-eyed, but with the look of a child raised in secrecy. The captains looked at one another. They did not yet understand. Jehoiada laid a hand on the boy's shoulder. His voice dropped low, but every word landed like stone.
"This is Joash, son of Ahaziah. The king's son is still alive."
The room went silent. No one dared breathe. For 6 years, they had believed Athaliah had wiped everything out, that the house of David had turned to ash, that the promise of God had been buried in the palace. And now standing before them, that promise had a face, a child. One of the captains fell to his knees first, then the second, then the third, not because Joash was strong, but because before them stood the promise God had preserved when human beings thought everything was lost. One older man began to weep, not loudly. He just covered his face, and his shoulders shook.
"The Lord has not abandoned us,"
he whispered.
"You have seen him. Now you must choose. Either continue living under a throne built on blood, or stand on the side of the covenant."
One captain looked up.
"If Athaliah finds out, she will kill every one of us."
Jehoiada answered,
"She has ruled for 6 years because we have been afraid of that sentence."
Those words pierced the room because they were true. Athaliah did not only have soldiers, she had the silence of righteous people. She had the bowed heads of those who knew what was right, but feared the cost of standing for it. She had the weariness of the people. She had the terrifying habit of an entire kingdom telling itself, "At least we are still alive." Then Jehoiada laid out the plan. The Sabbath would be the key. The day the guards changed shifts, those going off duty would not leave. Those coming on duty would take their places. 2 forces would merge into one within the temple without arousing suspicion. Not a riot in the streets. Not rebels burning city gates. Not shouting chaos in the night, but a restoration hidden inside the very breathing of worship. One captain asked,
"And the weapons?"
Jehoiada led them into the temple storehouse. Dust lay over objects that had slept through generations. Then he opened it. Light fell across ancient spears and shields, the weapons of King David. For a few seconds, no one spoke. David, that name seemed to awaken the bones of the whole nation. The man who had faced Goliath, the anointed one, the king who had received the promise. And now his spears and shields were being brought out to defend the last surviving son of his house.
"We do not need to bring weapons in from outside. God left them here long ago."
With that one sentence, the room changed. This was no longer merely military planning. This was memory armed. The soldiers took the spears. One man ran his hand over an old shield, as though touching a lost age. And for the first time in years, they no longer saw themselves merely as survivors under Athaliah. They saw themselves as men called to stand. Then the Sabbath came. Outside Jerusalem looked like any other day. People moved along the streets. Rituals continued. Guards changed places. There was no revolt, no chaotic crowd, no smoke rising outside the gates. But inside the temple, every position had been secured. The gates were controlled. The entrances are guarded. Those whose watch had ended stayed where they were. Those newly arrived took their places. David's spears rested in the hands of men who had decided they would no longer allow Athaliah to rule by fear. Joash was prepared in silence. The boy did not understand the full weight of the day, but there are things children can feel, even when they cannot name them. He knew the adults were more solemn than usual. He knew Jehosheba's eyes were wetter than normal. He knew Jehoiada looked at him not merely as a child, but as a responsibility preserved through 6 years of darkness. And the moment he stepped into the temple court, 6 years of silence began to crack. Rows of men stood waiting. Captains held spears. The people held their breath. In that moment, history itself seemed to gather in the smallness of his steps. He walked to the royal pillar. Jehoiada lifted the crown, not an ornament, a sign, a proclamation, a restoration. The crown was placed on Joash's head. The book of the covenant was given into his hands. Oil was poured. Then the trumpet sounded. That sound tore through 6 years of silence. The people clapped, and then the cry burst out,
Long live the king!
The applause rose. The sound of the people broke like a wave against stone. It rolled through the temple courts. It flew beyond the temple and reached the palace. And there, Athaliah heard it. At first, it was only a vague noise. Then the trumpets grew clearer. Then the shouting became clearer. A sound she hated because it did not belong to her. No one ever rejoiced like that for Athaliah. People feared her, they obeyed her, they bowed before her, but they did not delight in her. And now Jerusalem was rejoicing for someone else. Athaliah sprang to her feet. In that moment, her cold calm cracked. She moved toward the temple faster than a queen's normal stride. Her robe dragged behind her. Servants hurried after her in confusion. Guards looked at one another, not knowing what was happening. The closer she came, the louder the shouting became. And then she saw him, a boy standing by the royal pillar, a crown on his head, the law in his hand, the priest beside him, the captain standing guard around him. The people rejoiced as though 6 years had finally been ripped out of their throats. Athaliah looked at Joash, and for one moment she no longer saw a child. She saw the failure of that long-ago night. One child had escaped. One breath had slipped past her blade. One secret had grown up beneath her pride. The very existence of Joash was a living sentence against Athaliah. He did not need to accuse her. He did not need to recount the massacre. He did not need to point a finger. He only had to stand there. He only had to breathe. He only had to wear the crown. That alone was enough to expose the truth that Athaliah was not the rightful queen. She was only a woman who had sat too long on a throne that did not belong to her. Her rage flared, but beneath it lay naked fear, because a tyrant can survive being hated, but it cannot survive the moment people stop being afraid. She tore her clothes and cried out,
Treason! Treason!
Those 2 words fell into the temple court like black coals, but they no longer had any power. Because the mouth of the usurper was now calling restoration treason, the very woman who had slaughtered the royal line was now naming the true king a traitor. That was the moment sin showed its face in full. When the light falls on it, it does not repent, it screams. Jehoiada did not argue with her. He had not waited 6 years to persuade Athaliah. He gave the order to the captains.
Bring her out between the ranks. Do not put her to death in the house of the Lord.
The captains advanced. Athaliah stepped backward. In her eyes, rage and fear twisted together.
You dare lay hands on me?
No one answered. She turned toward the people.
I am your queen!
She still tried to carry the look of authority, but power was already beginning to fall off her, like a robe being torn away. She searched the crowd for faces that used to bow before her, but today they did not bow. A queen who builds her throne on fear loses everything the moment fear begins to break. The guards seized her. Athaliah struggled, but there was no throne left to shield her. No declaration left that could save her. No shadow of Jezebel long enough to cover the temple court. She was dragged out, not through the place of honor, not through the gate for kings, not through the place where she had once imagined she would be remembered. The horse's entrance took her out. A low place, a place for beasts, an ending stripped of every royal illusion. The woman who had turned David's palace into a place for murdering children was not allowed to die in the holy place. She was taken out of the temple, away from the sound of the trumpets, away from the crown, away from the people, away from the very story she thought she had written in blood. And there, Athaliah died. No one wept loudly. No one raised a statue. No one called her mother. There was only the heavy silence of justice after years of delay. After Athaliah's death, the people rushed into the temple of Baal. Everything that had been held down for 6 years finally broke open. The idols were smashed. The altars were torn down. Matan, the priest of Baal, was put to death. But true restoration was not only about breaking idols. The harder work was tearing out fear silenced, and the habit of bowing before darkness from the hearts of the people. Then, Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord the King and the people. This was not merely a change of throne, it was a return. And the final image is beautiful. Joash the child, once carried through a night of blood, now walked in the light. The doors that had once closed to hide him from death now opened to lead him to the throne. Joash sat on the throne, not because he was strong, not because the people were worthy, but because God had kept his promise in silence through faithful people, through 6 hidden years that Athaliah never saw. Athaliah tried to kill the royal line, but she could not kill the promise. She tried to rule by fear, but fear cannot build a kingdom of peace. This story reminds us that darkness may occupy the story for a season, but it can never hold the story in its hands forever. When God's time comes, the doors will open, the usurper will fall, and what he has preserved in the hidden place will step into the light. If this story touched your heart, write in the comments, "Lord, keep your promise alive in me." And if you love Bible stories told with honesty, emotion, and cinematic depth, share and subscribe to Fidelia Bible Stories, so that together we can keep stepping into stories where God preserves his promise, even through the darkest nights.